Just a little
Can you
jokester.
tell? Can you tell it live?
Can you tell that one?
Which is the real Kenny?
What a nerd. Oh my gosh, we have 41 participants.
All right.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Alyssa, Elise, Allison, Angela, Angels, Bert, Carrie, Kathy, Casey, Charlotte, Dan, Dana, David, Denise, Glenn, Greg, Jan, Jeff, Joshua. Wow, look at this list.
I know it
Kevin,
keeps growing.
Krista, Larry, Lena, Lynn, Lyndon, Mariah. Welcome everybody. Mary, Matthew, everyone's coming in the doors now. Michael, Mike, Reverend Dr. Randall in the house. Richard, Scott,
Yes.
Sean. You know, there aren't that many duplicates here. Tom,
There really
Tracy,
aren't.
Stephanie.
Did you say Stephanie? Yeah. Hey, Stephanie. She said hi. So
Tracy, Tom, etc. Sydney. Welcome, everybody. We are assembling the crew here for our webinar today.
make sure you hit record. Oh, it is recording. Okay, great.
It is recording. First of all, but just because we are ChurchCom, we are a family, could everyone just find the Zoom webinar chat? At the bottom of the window, there should be a chat button. And if you would just type in
Where you're from.
where you're from, and then how are you feeling from a scale of 1 to 10? How are you doing today, 1 to 10? I would say, Katie, Katie, what are you? I'm at a 9 right now.
I'm at an 8.5.
What about you, Shane?
Goodness, how are you? 17.
And Matt,
Dang.
1 to 10.
Yeah, doing great.
Caleb, 1 to 10. How are you feeling, Matt?
I'm at about a 6, which is the number of hours that I've slept last night. Maybe 5.
6. That's a lot. How are you getting that much sleep?
Well, it's that's
The latest game is everyone is logging into their Zoom accounts, going to the account management. You can look up how many minutes you've logged on from you can do a time period. And people are checking out how many minutes you've been on for this month of March, which just ended. I was on 162.5 hours across the entire month.
Where do you find that at? Where's that at on here?
It's in the Zoom accounts. If you go to zoom.us into your account, it goes into and you can find out.
Yeah, some account settings. I think you can find
but
it
look
there.
at this. We got people from Nashville and Lebanon, PA. Hey, I'm in Jersey. I know where Lebanon is. Brazil, Chicago, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Oregon. Look at this. Nebraska, Pennsylvania. Whoa, a bunch of people from Pennsylvania. St. Louis, Alexandria, who the governor of Virginia just announced, right? June 10th is the shelter at home date that they've just announced. Iowa, Indiana, El Dorado, Arkansas in the house. Thomas Station, Tennessee, Mariposa, California, Raleigh. Greg Morrison, you need to tell us what shade of blue, dark blue, light blue, or NC State. Which one is it? I'm a Duke blue guy, so. Arizona, we got a bunch of people. Thank you so much for joining us. If you don't know, my name is Kenny Jahng. I am the troublemaker in the house. Katie Allred is the one that keeps everything in order. And we've got our friends on the line here, Shane and Matt from Stamper Accounting. So Katie, why don't you set up, as there's a couple people still joining us, but
Sure.
as people settle in, just a reminder, there is a Q&A box below. So if you have any questions and answers, the guys are going to be answering questions periodically through the whole time that we're together. So you can open up that Q&A box and submit something. And here, the Zoom chat, again, we'll be monitoring the chat and answering questions here as well. So before we begin, Katie, can you just give us a framing of what are we doing here today?
Yeah.
How did we convince these guys to come on, and what we expect today?
Okay, so today we're talking about the PPP. It's what everybody's been talking about, the Paycheck Protection Program and the CARES Act that was passed recently by Congress. And things have changed about it even in the last 24 hours. And so we want to try to get you the most relevant and truthful information we possibly can. I know some people have sent us a couple of questions via email. Hopefully we will cover those and give you any answers. Of course, still feel free to ask in the Q&A or in the chat, whichever one you feel comfortable with. So Stamper Accounting and Tax is actually our accounting and tax firm. We use them for our services. Actually, I've been working with Shane for like 5 years ago. So we were friends in Nashville and have been friends since. So we really wanted to bring you somebody that we knew and trusted. Also, we know that they love the church and they love working with church plants. And we wanted to bring you someone that we knew and could trust. And so we trust them with our own stuff. So we're going to let them talk about it because we're not experts at it at all. We're experts in church communication, but not in accounting or tax. You can ask Matt. I think I ask him a question every other day. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Shane and Matt now.
I'm still trying to figure out where to find my hours. Where was that in here? I'm trying to find it. I want to see how many Zoom meetings
I think we'll do a webinar on that after this.
Webinar on that one. I think I've been in 4 hours already today, so there's that. So my name is Shane Gibson. I am a CPA in Nashville, as Katie mentioned. I have been practicing since 2011, and I've had my own firm since 2014. And so my title here at Stamper Accounting is Director of Accounting. So what I do is I run our accounting service department. We do accounting services, which includes bookkeeping, payroll, bill payments, and advisory services for businesses. But our biggest area that we help with is church plants and nonprofits. So my previous job before this, I was a nonprofit auditor. So we used to audit nonprofits. And so I wanted to get on the front end instead of always on the back end. And so that's kind of what I do over here at Stamper Accounting. So I lead our accounting team in that. And yeah, I'd say about 50% of our monthly work is with nonprofits and churches. So again, that's part of our heart, part of our mission. So glad to be here for that. So you talk, Matt?
All right, thank you. Yes, Shane and I joined forces, I guess, January of 2019. And Shane is the director of the accounting department. I'm the director of the tax department. CPA going on, I keep saying 20 years. I've been doing accounting and tax 20 years. Have this firm for the last 2.5 years. Focus on small businesses, nonprofits, ministries, individual tax returns, and just so happen to already be doing a lot of ministers' tax returns already, and working with nonprofits and churches, and then bringing Shane on board with the client base that he had. It's just expanded, and obviously, we serve all areas of the community, but really have a heart for the work of the kingdom and working alongside ministries to help advise in a tax and accounting capacity. And yes, I focus on taxes mainly. And certainly this bill has a lot of implications for small businesses and taxes. So we're here to help.
I'm going to say this too. Matt actually read the bill over the weekend. So he's got that on me.
Long, 800 pages.
Oh. So yeah, so appreciate you guys being here. Katie, I don't know if you want us to mention kind of our goal.
You can mention whatever you want.
Okay, I'll kind of give you a rundown of what we do. We did something similar yesterday with our client base and our businesses, and some nonprofits were in there as well, but this one's more focused on churches and nonprofits. What we want to do is talk a little bit about the overview of the CARES Act real quick, just to give a summary, because I know you've probably seen it in the news and wondering if that applies to you. And so what we're going to do is do an overview, and then we're going to talk specifically about 2 areas of it. The CARES Act is huge. It's like a $2.2 trillion stimulus bill. We're not talking about all of it. We're specifically going to be talking about the Small Business Administration loans, the SBA loans. There are 2 that we're going to be talking about. We have the Paycheck Protection Program, which is what Katie mentioned. And then there's also the economic injury and disaster loans. So we're going to give an overview of those, talk about them. And then we're just going to do a Q&A session a little bit, kind of walking through it, because we know a lot of people have similar questions about it. And we found yesterday that it was really helpful to answer a lot of those questions live, so that people who had similar questions, the same questions, were able to hear the response. So hopefully it's going to be helpful. Hopefully you'll leave here knowing a little bit more about what this means and how it can help you. Or yeah, that's kind of our plan.
Shut that off. Sorry about that.
You're fine. You're fine. It's been our day today. Lots of calls. So if you have questions as we are going, you can type out the questions over in the chat feature, and we'll try to get to them as we go. If we look at them and we know that they're about to be answered, we'll probably wait. But like I said, there is a Q&A session at the end that should be a little more helpful. And I should also mention that I have two screens, so it looks like I'm not looking at you, but I'm looking at my other screen. So, okay, so if you have questions, and just put them in there. Me and Matt will try to answer as we go, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so we're going to talk real quick about the CARES Act. So this was passed, I don't even know when it was passed, last weekend. Every day is running together. You've seen what it stands for, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. Now, the purpose of this is economic relief. In the past week alone, last week, 3.9 million people, or is it 3.3 million people, applied for unemployment. Because of this whole pandemic, a lot of businesses are forced to shut down for a time. You as churches and nonprofits have experienced this for sure. Most churches cannot meet as a normal congregation on Sunday, so you've definitely felt the weight of this. And a lot of businesses have also been forced to close. So the idea here is to provide economic relief to kind of support those businesses through this time. Big portion of that $2.2 trillion act was $329 billion of it is set aside for small businesses through the Small Business Administration. And like I said, it's in the form of a lot of loans that we're going to talk about here. So there's three forms of loan. We're not going to talk about the third form, which is debt relief. We're going to talk primarily about the PPP, which stands for Paycheck Protection Program, and the EIDL, or the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan, which Matt will cover that. So that's kind of a basic overview. We're just going to be talking about the SBA portion. Like I said, there's a lot in this bill for a lot of different industries, but you as churches typically fall within the small business side. So because you're under 500 employees, I should clarify that. They clarify a small business is an employer with under 500 employees. So we'll get into that. So let's talk about the PPP real quick. Yeah, Paycheck Protection Program. So a lot of you guys have heard this. It launched today in some banks. Some banks are holding off over the weekend. But they're opening loan processing today. So this is primarily, as I mentioned, a lot of people filed for unemployment last week. The idea here in this program is to provide the funds to cover those paychecks over this period. So what it is, the Paycheck Protection Program is a Small Business Administration loan, okay? Meant to cover salary costs or payroll for a 2-month period. Part of it is that a lot of people got let go before this was passed, and part of it is to enable the employers to hire those people back. So what this loan is, just to give you a basic rundown real quick, it is a loan based on 2.5 months of payroll cost. Okay, so let me kind of break this down a little bit. If you are an employer, if you have employees, which most people here probably do, some form of employees, what that means is your loan that you would get is 2.5 months of your payroll cost. So what you would do is you would do a payroll report for the 12 months preceding the loan, and you would look at your average monthly payroll, and your loan amount would be 2.5 times that, so 2.5 months worth. So basic example is if you have payroll of $10,000 a month, you would get a $25,000 loan to help cover payroll through that time. Now, here's what makes this so good for most small businesses is that if the funds are used as they're supposed to be used, you can apply for what's called loan forgiveness. Okay, so loan forgiveness is forgiveness of the loan for 8 weeks of what they call essential cost or payroll cost, which is over there on the right, the forgivable expense list. So what that means is after 8 weeks of this loan, you can apply for forgiveness to cover 8 weeks of those costs. Okay. So what this is let's use that same example, is that let's say your loan was $25,000. You end up, you keep all your employees on for the 8 weeks or basically 2-month period. And let's say your payroll costs were $20,000. You would be able to apply for forgiveness because you use those funds for payroll, which is what they were supposed to be used for. You can get $20,000 of it forgiven. Okay. After 8 weeks, because you used it for what it was supposed to be. So then it turns more into a grant than a loan. So this amount, these funds can only be used for, like I said, the purpose it was meant for, which is payroll cost and essential running costs. So this includes payroll, utilities, rent if you're under a lease, and mortgage interest. Okay. Now, one huge stipulation here on the forgiveness is that payroll has to be 75% of the forgiveness amount. So you had to use at least 75% of the money on payroll to get it forgiven. And I want to give one more clarification here on this. Remember that the purpose of this loan is to make sure that you don't let your employees go. Okay. So a lot of for-profit businesses, we have a lot of restaurants we work with. A lot of them had to shut their doors and let their employees go last month. So the idea here is they get this loan and they hire those employees back. Okay. So what's going to happen to get it forgiven? You have to use it on those costs, but you also have to use or maintain a similar head count and wage amount. So your total salaries and total wages can't dip down too far. You got to maintain the same level to get it forgiven. So that's basics. And I want to answer a question that's just posted. So some of the loan applications say provide 2019 payroll information. It depends on the loan. Matt, do you want to jump in and say what you said about that, about the bill?
Well, the bill reads that you use the average month's payroll for the previous 12 months prior to the loan being given. So that's pretty straightforward. What's not straightforward is the SBA guidance that they issued saying for most taxpayers, this will be 2019, which is skipping ahead 3 months, eliminating 3 months from that calculation.
Yeah.
So that's one of many inconsistencies we'll talk about.
Yeah. So on that, I mean, we'd probably just recommend whatever the loan application says, you would do it. And give some this is changing a lot as more guidance is released. The regulations were released yesterday, and they changed a lot of the stuff we talked about yesterday. So we're going to try to stay up to date and keep learning as they release more regulations. What it says right now is interim final regulations, interim. So it could change over the weekend for all we know. Okay, so that's just the basics real quick. The big thing that changed in the past day, which we're trying to figure out, is payroll cost. The part that's really clear is that it means salaries, it means W-2 employees. What's not clear right now is if you have contract employees. So as of right now, we're seeing contradictory information on contract employees. So I would just, if you do have contract employees, we'd hold off until the final regulations are given, because originally they said contract employees count in the calculation of average monthly payroll, but now they're saying it doesn't. And so we're just going to wait until they release the final regulations on this before we can advise there. So if you do have contract employees, we would wait until next week and see what the final regulations say. So just give kind of a clarification there, because that was the recent change yesterday that changed a lot of businesses. So if you have questions on this part, how the loan is forgiven, the payroll cost, we will get a little bit more into that in the Q&A. But that's just a basic overview of the Payroll Protection Act. So I can answer this question real quick as well. So a lot of churches and ministries have missionaries overseas. As these aren't considered employees because they're kind of just supported, they would not be considered in the Paycheck Protection Program. This is specifically for salaries. So here's kind of a thing I'm telling some of my churches and stuff we work with is this is to cover your monthly salaries. You can get a loan to cover the salaries and then use the funds on the salaries, but that should free up some money that was going to be used on the salaries for if you have missionaries or other things like that. So we can get more into those details in the Q&A. But that's the overview of the Payroll Protection Act or Paycheck Protection Act. The next part is Matt, economic injury.
Thank you. Yes, I'll contrast the PPP with the EIDL. We've been speaking a lot of acronyms these last few days: Payroll Protection Program and then the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I'll talk a little bit about how they differentiate. But when it comes to Q&A, I'm probably the least technologically advanced of anybody in the room, including all the participants. So I'm able to do the Q&A stuff. Those pop up, and that's how I answer a lot of them. I can't really follow the chat as well.
I literally just found the questions. I'm sorry about that. I didn't see those over there. I didn't even see the questions posted until I just found the button that said Q&A. Sorry.
Well,
That's okay. I'll be sure to help you out at the end there.
I found the chat feature, but I didn't see the Q&As.
Yeah,
So,
we'll answer those at the end.
Yeah, so there's a lot of these I'm seeing that we have answers for, and I have explanations for why you're getting conflicting information. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL, the difference is you can apply for that one right now online, sba.gov. It literally takes about 5 minutes to apply. So you can do that one. You don't have to go to your bank. You have to work through an SBA lender for the other. It does apply, again, to businesses with not more than 500 employees. All nonprofits and churches pretty much are going to meet that criteria. The maximum amount of the loan is $2 million, and you can get a $10,000 advance on that loan, which it says will be distributed within 3 days. I haven't yet spoken to anybody that's gotten it yet within 3 days, and I know some people who applied more than 3 days ago. So the interest rate on this loan is for nonprofits 2.75%. Terms of the loan 30 years. The first payment's not due until 1 year after the loan is originated. So a lot of time lag there. And what can it be used for? This is the big difference between the two loans. This one can be used for any type of operating expenses of the church or the ministry. It doesn't have to be used on salaries and insurance, interest or rent or utilities. It can be used for, it's pretty broad. It just says financial obligations and operating expenses. Is there loan forgiveness in this one? Up to $10,000. And I want to read a little bit from the interim final regs. They've asked for comments on the interim, and I'm not sure when they'll issue the final regs, but when they finally do, it will be set in stone, and all the answers will regarding how it's going to be applied to contractors and such will be answered. So you can get 10,000 of it forgiven. I'll talk about that in just a second. Those are really the primary things actually I wanted to talk about. If you use it for payroll costs, that could affect how it coordinates with the debt forgiveness from the PPP. But if it's not, if you use it for other expenses outside of those enumerated in the PPP, then it does not affect the PPP loan at all, and the $10,000 can be forgiven in addition to amounts forgiven in the PPP. But if you're using it for payroll and such, you can't use those same dollars twice. So it could provide an additional $10,000 of forgiveness for loans, and it is advanced into your account supposedly in 3 days. But if it was used for payroll, it just means the two go together. And Susan asked about the effect of the applying for both. You can apply for both. It doesn't cause any type of conflict. So you should be able to still apply. It's going to be when the 8 weeks are up, when you say what you use the money for, that it's really going to break down into how much is forgiven. So that's just a real quick overview. It's for self-employed individuals as well. A lot of these, and we can get to this in the Q&A, is the interplay between self-employed persons. And of course, ministers of the gospel are considered self-employed in some areas of the tax code, and then in some areas they are not. And then of course, some ministers opt out of Social Security altogether. And so there's a lot of complex rules for ministers that we can talk about. So that's really all I have kind of on the EIDL, Shane.
Perfect. We'll get a little more into this in a minute. Let me see if there's anything I can answer real quick. We're actually going to head into the Q&A now. We wanted to give a quick overview of those. We're going to start answering some specific questions. We can answer some that are common ones we get. But I know that you guys have some specific for your ministries and for your pastors and housing allowances. I've seen that in here as well. And so we're going to try to answer those. I know that the Q&A section will take a little longer than the actual overview. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that a little bit. I want to answer this real quick. What do you do next? Because a lot of people get this. What are the next steps? Like I said, the loans are released today, and most banks have this. So the first step we're telling people is you got to check with your local bank. Whichever one you are using is the first ones you go to, because they're doing like not a tier system, but they're doing a list in the order they process them. Yeah, they're doing a list of ones. Let me turn this off. Sorry. The way they process them, and they're putting people who bank with them first on the list. So check with your local bank first. In Nashville, we use one called Pinnacle, and they've been really fast. I've also learned that Capstar Bank here in Tennessee is doing it. US Bank is. There's a lot of banks jumping on it. So check with your local bank. It's a 2-page application for the Paycheck Protection Program. It's pretty quick. And so you can reach out to them, see what they need, and go and start gathering documents. We can send over some a follow-up kind of resource packet that has some of this information in there as well after this. But that's kind of the next step is start gathering the documents, which I'll actually open those up real quick of what you may need. Pulling out your payroll tax reports, whatever payroll program you use, you can export that into get your average payroll and do all that through that. I saw a question in here real quick about, I understand healthcare costs are considered as payroll. Yes, they are included in part of the cost. The cost for benefits is also included in payroll costs. So yes, that would be included in there as well. Let's see. And then there's another question on, just because I saw this one over there, the average payroll costs, the 12-month period. Again, we're seeing conflicting things there with different banks. Some banks are requiring from the date you do the loan, 12 months back, and then most of the ones that we've seen today have been 2019. So that's going to be dependent on your application. So let me get back to this real quick. So the documents that you need to start gathering are your payroll tax reports, all the IRS filings. If you guys do a 990, which most churches don't, but ministries do, documentation for health insurance and all of that. Start gathering those together and contact the local bank. So let's get into just actual Q&A here. Matt, if you see any, you want to jump on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of them are going to be attached to the contractor question. So I want to just kind of answer that,
Go for
where
it.
things are as of 3:30 Eastern time today. The interim final regs have, in my opinion, some conflicting information. The law was fairly clear that payments made to contractors should be considered in this calculation. However, in the Q&A on the regs, it says, do independent contractors count as employees for purposes of the calculations? The answer is no. Independent contractors can apply for their own PPP loans, which basically sent kind of shockwaves through the CPA world today. However, in the same regs, it's still listed as how do I calculate the maximum amount I can borrow. In another place, it says to subtract any compensation paid to an employee in excess of $100,000 and any amounts paid to an independent contractor in excess of $100,000. What that says is that in the calculation, assuming that other part I just read didn't apply, what we've been saying all week is over 100,000, you have to cap it at 100,000. Anything above that, you can't get a loan for. And so this language remains in these final regs that are proposed. And so there's conflicting information. So the answer that I can give is we have to wait until the final regs are issued, and they will most likely, but this is the federal government, eliminate one of those two items or change one of the two so that they are in agreement. The way the law reads is that you do count independent payments made to independent contractors, but the law is not really the law until the regulations come out. And so the regulations have not been finalized. However, people are applying for these loans and have already applied for them, and they need to have guidance on what to put down for their amount they're trying to borrow. So again, Shane mentioned we're kind of cautioning perhaps it's wise to wait. Again, you run into there's $350 billion, which I think will be applied for today. I think at least that amount will be applied for today by businesses throughout the country. So what the U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has said is that we'll go back to Congress and get more money, but that requires, again, another act of Congress. So there's a lot of unknowns, and Dr. Deals asked some questions about that, and I can answer one of those real quick. Heard the average monthly payroll cost was 12 months, 4/1 through 3/31. That's what I applied for this myself for our firm. We've been negatively affected like many companies, and I used 4/1 through 3/31 because I usually try to stick with what the law says. But some of these lenders are inserting different things, and then they're moving customers that already do business with them to the front of the line, and I can't account for that. But the way the law reads is 4/1 through 3/31. So that will take care of that question, Shane.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let me grab one more here.
Hope for it.
Also, to be forgiven, the loan amount must be spent by June 30th. It's 8 weeks after the loan's granted. There's an 8-week period, and it may or may not be June 30th.
Mm-hmm. And I might need to get your assistance on this one, Matt, because from what I've seen, there's no clear guidance on this. So in the same question, or the prior one, we talked about the 1099s, but a lot of ministers here have a housing allowance. So I want to hit two things real quick. First thing is Matt mentioned that the allowable amount is for the salaries have to be capped at 100. So if there's anybody over 100,000 a year, you basically cap them at 100 and treat them as if they get paid 100,000 a year instead of anything over. So no matter if you make $1 million a year or 100,000, you're capped at the same amount. So you just cap it off. And then go for it. I was going to ask you if you've seen anything about the housing allowance yet.
Well, housing allowance for ministers that have a designated portion of their income for housing, not subject to federal income tax. It is subject to self-employment tax. So therefore, the way the bill reads is for self-employed individuals, also including ministers, it's income in respect to self-employment taxes. So that means that it does count towards the amount that you can borrow. Let's say you've got the pastor's the only person on that works at the church. They have a little bit of salary and some housing allowance. That full amount is what you're going to use in the calculation, because that's income that is subject to self-employment tax. Of course, any deductions against self-employment income have to be reduced. You have to reduce the amount. So it's going to be your net income, basically. If you file a Schedule C, you'll look at that very bottom number on the right. That's your net income for self-employment. So that's the number that you would use really for the last 12 months. That's why 2019 might be easier. It may not make a difference if you're making the same amount every month, but you would use that number divided by 12, multiplied by 2.5, and there you go. That help some?
Yeah, I think so. This is when it gets, I see another one down here about kind of the same, along the same lines as if the ministers are considered self-employed, does the salary qualify for the PPP? So I think what we should clarify here is, does the church apply for it, or does the individual apply for it? That would be the question, Matt.
Well, certainly the individual qualifies, can apply for it regardless if they're self-employed. That we know with certainty. Whether the church should include someone that they 1099, including a pastor, and they pay housing allowance to. But of course, housing allowance sometimes goes on the W-2. That's the tricky part that I'm hesitant to give advice that may change over the weekend. But the way that I understand it, if they're on W-2, all that should be included.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another one. If the pastor or the minister is a 1099, we should wait and see until the final regulations are released, just like any other, just like other 1099 employees.
But most churches now are paying them with a W-2.
Yeah.
And that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, W-2 is pretty easy, but 1099 is where all of the issues are happening today. So we're going to need to wait until those final regulations are passed. So I'll answer this one real quick. Does payroll involve taxes that the church pays? The way the bill reads right now, no, it does not. So it only includes gross wages. So the taxes, they're an expense of the church. They're not considered gross wages. They're a different expense. And so no, they would not be included in the calculation. We would just do gross wages, which would involve benefits, but not tax, not the taxes.
The FICA. Now, any state, like for ministries, not state unemployment, federal unemployment, those types of taxes do, but FICA is explicitly eliminated from how much you can borrow,
So
which is the 7.65%.
Yeah, so the FICA is eliminated. That's the employer taxes. The unemployment taxes, that would be federal unemployment or FUTA, those would be. Or if you have state unemployment. In Tennessee, we have SUTA. I wonder if your state has SUTA, then yes, that would be included. I want to answer this one real quick about utilities. So the thing about utilities, the amount, so there's two different sides. There's the amount you apply for, the amount of the loan, and then there's the amount forgiven, okay? So the amount of the loan is specifically only payroll cost. The calculation for calculating how much you can apply for is only payroll costs, not utilities or rent. But the amount that is forgiven can include utilities, rent, mortgage interest, and I have that list and I just blanked on the last one, but it can include those. Now here's something that's really important on this forgiveness amount is that the rent, utilities, and all the other portions cannot exceed a certain amount. Okay, so you have to use, so the amount that's forgiven, okay, so let's say you're applying for $10,000 to be forgiven, at least 7,500 of that, 7,500 has to be payroll. So 75% or more has to be used on payroll. So if your rent, utilities, other things like that exceed 25%, you're gonna have to cap it. It would use it for. So hope that helps with that utilities and rent question.
Sydney, I would say find another bank that's going to be better to work with. That's really not a function of the law that they passed, but more of a bank policy. And if they're not going to prioritize your application or take your application, then there are plenty of banks that will. I don't know of any. I don't know I just know the Hendersonville area, Nashville, Tennessee, and I know we got people from all over the country, so that's not going to be helpful to tell you to go to a local bank in Tennessee. Chad Berry, do you include, oh, we talked about that.
Yeah, that's what I just did.
Sorry. When applying for the PPP, one of the required questions was ownership of the organization. What do you suggest putting an answer to the fact that a person cannot hold ownership of a nonprofit religious organization?
Yeah.
Note the servers have crashed since then and the site has been taken down. That doesn't surprise me at all. What do you think there, Shane?
Yeah, we actually did this today with another one of my nonprofits. It says, is putting as an answer. We put NA, so not applicable.
Not applicable.
You don't have owners because you don't have equity. So we put NA for that. Whether or not they accept it, I don't know. They haven't processed the loan yet, but that question doesn't apply to nonprofits. So I would say put NA for that. And if it doesn't work, I'll let you know. We submitted it today, so we'll see. I want to answer this one real quick. So I've had this conversation yesterday with some churches as well of, we have reserves and we think we can make it through. Should we do this? One thing, I can't give a specific answer to your ministry, but what I can say is that this can help. From what we see, there's not a lot of negative impacts of this loan. The interest rate, so the worst case scenario is that you have a loan at 1% interest rate, and you just pay it back in whenever 8 weeks is over. Not a huge risk involved. So what I'm kind of advising right now to some churches, again, I don't know your specific ministry, so I can't say, yes, you should do this, or no, you shouldn't. But I think it's better to apply and not necessarily use it all than to miss out on it, because we don't know how long this is going to last or the negative impact it's going to have for a few months. So yeah, you might have a few months reserves to kind of get through it, but I guess the thing here is that this might be a way not to deplete your reserves and cover your salaries and make sure your people stay employed. So I would say it seems like a good safety net that the government's given you, and sometimes like it might be okay to utilize it because it's here to help. And so, but that's up to you and your elders or your directors or anything. But we don't see a ton of negative repercussions for using this loan. I think it's probably one of the best loans we've seen, or it's not even a loan, like a grant almost. So.
Well, and also I work with a lot of, ministers and doing taxes, they talk about gray areas and things, and obviously more so than other types of clients, they want to do everything above board. They want to make sure that they're not doing anything inappropriate. But part of the reason for this stimulus package and these grants and basically the government giving money to folks to help them through this time is because nonprofits and churches too, they're employers and they're helping keep the economy going. And so just like for-profit businesses, it's an important objective of the federal government for all types of employers to not suffer, irreparable harm from the current situation. So it's not unethical to take a loan when you need a loan, when you've suffered a downturn in giving, a downturn in revenues to help sustain during this time. That's exactly what it's put in place for. Glenn Sutherland, you asked, is your minister self-employed? That's where we have the contradictory guidance right now. Just to be point blank, anybody who gives you definitive, I think right now is not understanding the conflict in the temporary final regs that are not final, because we just don't know if they're considered self-employed. They can obviously, your minister can apply for this right now. That is, I do not foresee that changing. The law matches everything we've seen. Income in respect to a self-employed individual. I've said that term 1,000 times this last week. That is your payroll as a self-employed person for this calculation. How much you've netted after all the income you brought in and your expenses. That amount up to $100,000 is what you use in your calculation as a self-employed individual. That's not going to change. What we're talking about is a church that pays some contractors and they may pay their minister as a self-employed person. Right now, we don't know because of the conflicting information within this reg. So my advice might be to hold off until next week. But it leads right into anonymous attendee. Will the pool of money run out? I think yes. I think it might run out today, actually, because of the amount of, because every small business, every self-employed individual in America is, if that's aware of this, is applying for this, and that's a lot of people, a lot of businesses, and it's up to $10 million. So, yeah, some of these people with 200-300 employees, they're going to get millions of dollars from this, and you start multiplying that by the whole nation, and it's gonna run out quick.
But they did say they will release more, probably.
They said, well, Mnuchin said he'll go back to Congress to get more, but it all depends on whether you think Mnuchin has that kind of pull.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. That's what's tough about waiting, but also there's no guidance on the 1099s right now. And that's really the issue that all CPAs are dealing with today, trying to figure it out. We're all in the same boat trying to figure that portion out. And the website to apply for the EIDL, I posted that into the chat.
SPA.gov.
Yeah, I posted over there to everybody. There's the EIDL. Now, here's the thing about the PPP application. Remember that this you can't do online. You have to contact your local bank. So the EIDL, you supply on the SBA website, very simple application. The Paycheck protection is going through a local bank. So just to give you that. And here's a question about employer portion of Social Security to be included in payroll costs. It is not. So the employer tax will not be included. The FICA, the Medicare, or the Social Security will not be included. Only the unemployment.
And the same applies to self-employed individual, because that's your self-employment tax you pay is basically your payroll taxes. Those are excluded, the employer and the employee portion. You don't include any of that for a self-employed individual. So all that's just excluded.
Yeah.
Sydney, can you clarify that question a little bit? That is assistance with church apps. I don't.
It might have been. Was it a previous one we had? Let me see.
All right. Lee here from Cross Plains, Tennessee. I know Lee. Our church owns raw land with no building. We do have a loan on the land. Can the payment be forgiven? Interest on that loan paid in the 8 weeks. That's the other thing that Shane couldn't remember. He said that third thing.
Interest, that's what it is.
Interest on loans that existed prior to the disaster is the way it really reads, but pretty much loans that you already had taken out before COVID-19 closed everything down. Any loans that you had, the interest you pay on those can be used with the loan proceeds, and that amount that you pay will be part of that. That is what is forgiven. Thank you for that great question, Lee.
Yeah. This is one I can't answer really. We're not sure what the chances that it won't be approved, because I mean they opened it today, and they just now started processing them. So I don't think there's a single person who's been approved yet. So we just don't know yet, and that's why we'll have to wait until Monday to see. And the forgiveness, it's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, the law says if you use it and you can prove it, it will be forgiven. So the only way it would not be forgiven is if you didn't use it in terms with the regulations, which are the payroll stuff that we just talked about.
And one thing about applying for it too, we didn't mention this. If you've not been harmed, and there are a few for-profit businesses that have not been harmed by this.
Zoom.
But you should not apply for this if you have not experienced a decline in your business.
Yeah.
This is for those that have been injured economically, and so therefore, but anonymous, if you, that's not your name, whoever this might be.
Oh, no.
If you follow the rules that we're explaining to you, it should not be not approved. The forgiveness should apply. This is the way the rules read. So I wouldn't not apply for fear of that if you're confident that you're going to spend it on these types of items. Those types of items, it will be forgiven according to the way that the law was written and everything's been laid out.
And another thing too, because I know we're hitting the last 10 minutes here, and so I just want to add some clarifications. We don't see a lot of let's say that you don't have contractors and you have a salary, which could be a good portion of everyone here. There's no harm in applying for it. I do recommend. I mean, again, I don't know your specific church, but just something to think about. If you were negatively affected, which most nonprofits that I work with and that I know were, there's no harm in doing it. And if it turns out that something changes, I don't know what could happen, but just pay it back. I don't think it's bad to go ahead and apply before it runs out for most churches. This is a way it can help a lot of nonprofits. I know a lot of nonprofits had some fundraisers canceled. Churches can't meet on Sundays, and which can affect new giving. There's a lot of things that can be affected here. So use your judgment, use the board of directors, the elders, whatever you guys want to do. But as far as we go, we do think this is a good option for a lot of nonprofits to help them through this time. Because one of the biggest cost centers, or the biggest spend at a lot of churches, one of the biggest factors is employees, especially small churches. Salaries is a huge portion of the cost associated with the churches. And so this can be a kind of a bit of grace in this time for that. So just something to think about. I don't think there's a huge, I don't think there's a huge risk in applying for it. It might help, but again, I cannot advise you specifics because I don't know your church or your situation, but just want to throw that off. You see anything you want to answer, Matt?
Yeah, I guess I should have clarified. How much time do we have? We're going off at the end of the hour.
About 8 minutes.
Okay.
We can go a little
Tell
bit.
them what to do for those that still have questions, because we're not going to get to all these.
Okay. We have we're going to send this out, but we do have a newsletter we've been sending out to kind of send out information as it is passed. And we'll post the link to our newsletter, or we'll get the email list here and we'll send out a follow-up email. And yeah, we'll try to follow up and give information. That's kind of the biggest thing right now, because we're a pretty small firm, and the amount of questions right now it's hard for us, our small team, to keep up with. And so one of the best ways to get answers is just our newsletter. We're going to be sending out as much as we can information in our newsletters, and that could be a way to answer some of the questions. And then if you have specific questions, you can email us. My email is shane@stampercpa.net. I'll put that in the comments. But I will just advise that it might be a little while before I can get to emails in this time, because we have a lot of companies going through this.
And I'm Matt.
Yeah.
Matt at Stamper. Yeah, Katie's putting it in there. I'm just Matt at stampercpa.net. Happy to answer any questions. I've been doing that pretty much nonstop for a week, and I enjoy doing it. That's what I'm here for. Kathy asked. Sorry.
So we'll answer what we can. And if you are one of our nonprofits and churches, feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to hop on a call as well.
Kathy has a pastor coming on board mid-April. Can the salary be covered? The amount that you're getting the loan for will probably include the old pastor, if you had one, or all of your. What you're calculating the loan amount on is the previous 12 months. What you spend it on can be this new pastor's salary. So it doesn't, and part of it too, we didn't talk about the head count, Shane. If the head count goes down, then that affects loan forgiveness as well. So we want to keep in mind that the main thing is to keep people employed. So if you see a reduction in your head count over this 8-week period from then you're going to see part of the loan not forgiven. It's a very complex calculation, but just know you want to keep everybody employed during those 8 weeks. That's the primary goal of this. Pension benefits are included if paid for by the organization. Yes.
And I'll answer Richard's question. Let's see. Okay, so some people, let's see, the director is working. So it looks like some of the people are on UC, is that unemployment?
Yeah.
So UC. So if there's already been employees let go and they're on unemployment, like I mentioned before, the purpose of this act is to get them back on staff. So what would happen, just like a lot of our restaurants, is You have to hire them back. Usually we recommend hiring them back and giving them an average of what they were getting paid those months to keep the headcount and the salary the same, because the loan is supposed to cover that salary, because you're using that salary to calculate the amount of the loan and the forgiveness. So you bring them back on, keep paying them even if they're off. And so a lot of our restaurants are rehiring people and they're just not scheduled, but they're still getting paid. The idea behind that is it's cheaper for the governments than paying unemployment. So
all right, let me knock out a few here in rapid succession. I'm just going to answer it and move on. Dana Meeker, please review which taxes can be included in the PPP. Any state and local taxes related to payroll. That's the bottom line. Federal taxes are not. So unemployment, although I think federal unemployment does count. So excuse me, FICA cannot be. It's explicitly excluded. So Social Security, Medicare cannot. State unemployment, if you're a nonprofit that has to pay that, federal unemployment. Greg, what's in it for the banks? You'll have to ask the banks. I've asked that question myself. They get to service the loan, but I don't know what's in it for them. We have an on-site preschool. Oh, whoops. I stepped away for a bit, so I apologize if you touched. What can you tell me about the pandemic unemployment assistance? Shane, you want to grab that $600 a week?
Yeah, it's federal addition to unemployment. So you apply for your unemployment if you are unemployed, you apply for unemployment through your state, and you will get $600 per week from the federal government as pandemic unemployment insurance. I don't know or assistance. I don't know too much about it because they just opened it up. But I do know it's going through the state's unemployment program. So you apply there, and the federal government, whenever they get that done, is going to be supplementing with $600 a week if you are unemployed. Okay,
Susan, I think it's fine the way you've done it. You're putting yourself as the representative of the church. I think that the head of the deacons or the trustee or whoever's the most in charge person is the one who needs to be filling this out for the church. Again, all churches are kind of different. The head pastor or elders and all that. So you may want to check with your pastor. If you are the pastor, then it's probably fine. All right. One church was told by their bank they could not apply because the church only had bank accounts. Again, find a different bank. If the bank you're trying says we're not going to work with you, there will be an SBA approved bank that will work with you. I guarantee it. I know of several in Hendersonville that will. But again, that's Hendersonville. So just keep trying on that. Teresa, if we still have money in our reserves, do we apply for one or both? We're our church, so giving is down. I mean, my gut says you apply for both. Again, in order to help get money to supplement during these times, my recommendation is to apply for both unless there's some type of reason not to. Like people that opt out of Social Security, they have non-financial reasons for doing that typically. So I can't answer those types of questions. But if you're concerned about paying bills and things, then I would apply for both. All right, Shane, we got like 1 minute.
Let's see if I can do this one. So can a staff from a church preschool be covered? I know there was a preschool one up there as well. It depends if they are under the same company or not. If they are different companies, you would have two separate loans for these companies for the preschool covering those staff. Hope that answers it. We just got a loan for a new church. Can we include that mortgage?
I keep waiting for Kenny and Katie to cut us off.
Yeah, well, we got 1 minute.
But email me questions, matt@stanfordcpa.net. I will answer them after this. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, I'll do the best I can to answer as well. Like I said, we're going through this with a lot of our clients. So send us emails, sign up for our newsletter. I will try to, let me see if I got that here actually. Hold on, got a link. Well, I'll find a way to do it. I think I'll just send out an email to the email list of everyone here, if that's possible, because I can't.
Yeah, we can send out an email to everybody.
Thank you, Katie.
Oh, Katie's back. All right.
Yeah, popped in. I mean, Kenny's been this whole time, so.
Kenny's been really thoughtful the entire time. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything.
I think he's actually on phone calls, but.
Did we miss any here? Loan for the new church.
I have copied and pasted this, so we can answer him in an email if you want.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer on email. Hopefully this was helpful to everybody.
And this is being recorded, right, Katie? So
yeah, it is being recorded, so we'll post it in the group as well.
Okay. And again, we'll try to send out newsletters, things like that, helping people through this. So
yeah.
Next
Glad
step,
it could be helpful.
Trying to get all the questions. Next steps would be to reach out to your local bank and see if they do it. If you guys want to do this. So thank you guys for giving us the time. I just realized I'm still sharing my screen. I probably could have stopped sharing that. There we go.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Anything else, Katie?
I don't have anything else. Anything else from y'all? We will answer the rest of the questions via we'll join on an email.
Yeah.
So
And there's
guys for
sorry, this is not all set in stone as far as that contractor question that everybody's asking about. It really applies to ministers. I'd love to give a definitive answer, but I believe there's still contradictory information out there, and maybe during the webinar it was answered and finalized. We'll find out soon and let you know.
I'll send up a follow-up. We'll be doing newsletters and trying to keep up to date and keep people up to date what to do. So again, you can go to our website, go to or email us at stanfordcpa.net. Or if you have any other questions you have, just reach out to us. So.
All right. Thanks, guys.